tens, but from the millions, because of the oppression that the Communist Party brought. And here you go. There's now the ruling party and the ruling people doing exactly what they hated when the emperors were suppressing them, oppressing them, killing them, making sure that there was no uprising. Okay? Let's talk about Lenin and Stalin, Communist Russia. We saw that Russia, communism never panned out for them either. We found out that what it caused is horrible living conditions. Everybody was supposed to be living this great communist life, and how this communism was an equal distribution on the basis of someone's ability. However, it became where the Communist Party just ruled, and everybody else that wasn't joined the Communist Party was oppressed, was killed. You had to show allegiance to the Communist Party, or else. There could be no dissension. You couldn't have Christians unless they espoused the communist doctrine. You couldn't have freedom. There was no other religion that was allowed. Different lifestyles were not allowed because it would challenge the authority of the communist doctrine. So let me, talk to you about this. Is that you had Hitler, which was a dictator, a despot. Then you had Lenin and Stalin, which killed many people. And here you've got the dictator on the one side, the ruling party on the other side, and it's kind of like a snake with a tail in its mouth. You see the same result, whether it's far right or whether it's far left, because there's always going to be those people who are, quote, end quote, enlightened. So let's talk about a couple other people that have come up recently, Gaddafi being one of them, and Hussein being another. So Gaddafi was taken out of Libya, and then was born a terrorist organization called ISIS, and rightly determined that there was a vacuum there. The one thing that dictators do, whether it be Russia, whether it be Libya, whether it be Hussein, they have the ability to oppress people in order to control them. Russia and Eastern Europe was under the thumb of the Communist Party, the KBG. They ruled by fear. The same way with Gaddafi, the same way with Hussein. They ruled by fear, and their might, their military, their allegiance to Hussein kept a lid on all the infighting, and it's like everybody had someone to point their hate towards, which is Saddam Hussein or was Gaddafi. Do I approve of either one of those? Do I approve of any of those leaders that I've been talking about? No, I do not. But we have to look at the dynamic of what happened when there was a dictator or a king over the country. They used fear, they used arms, they used secret KGB, the SS, in order to keep the people in fear, because you didn't know if a person was a KGB agent or a SS agent. So it kept people in fear, it kept them apart, and it kept them controlled. And that's what Gaddafi did, that's what Hussein did, that's what other dictators do, is they keep a lid on the people. Therefore, any insurrection by any group of people is going to be met with force and with power, and with destruction. The point is that the people replaced leaders they thought were bad, only to find that the ones that replaced them were horrible. I want to give you a biblical perspective of evil as being like jello, as gelatin. The first one, we're going to talk about Esther in the book of Esther, and we're going to talk about Haman. Haman was a ruler right underneath Ahasuerus, the king. Ahasuerus had a bug up his butt. Excuse me, but that's what he had, because there was a guy that would not bow down to him. All these other people would bow down to him, except this man called Mordecai, who would not bow down to another man. He would only bow down to God. And this is what it says in Esther, I think, chapter 3. And it actually is chapter 1. You read the whole book because it's awesome. But this is what it says. When Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath. And he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they showed him the people of Mordecai, where Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus. There are certain people scattered abroad, and this is what he said to Ahasuerus. There is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people, neither keep they the Lord king's laws. Therefore it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. To talk a little bit more bluntly, to allow them to live. So Haman basically lied to Ahasuerus because there was no problem with them. It doesn't say that they were doing anything or causing any problems. However, because of of Haman's hate for Mordecai, he decided he was going to wipe out the whole race. Not the first time that happened to the Jews, or somebody tried to do that to the Jews. So, I'm making a long story short. He goes out and tries to do this. Mordecai finds out what's going on. He tells Esther, hey, look, this is what's happening. We need we need salvation here by somebody. And since you're the king's wife, Esther was a Jewess herself, this is what we need to do. You need to talk before the king, tell him what's going on. Esther says, hey, wait. If he doesn't accept me, I die. Mordecai said, you know something? You may die anyway, but God's going to deliver us another way. They did that. It was saved. Haman ended up hanging on a gallows because of what he did, the lies he took, and the place that he put the king. Well, the king knew that his word couldn't be broken. So what he had to do is write another letter out and say, okay, the Jews can protect themselves. On this certain day when they come and when people come and try to destroy them, the Jews did and took everybody out that tried to destroy them. Bottom line is Mordecai became second in charge of the kingdom. Another one is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. This is from the book of Daniel. And there were Chaldeans. They were people that were, born as Chaldeans. They were, they were members. They were the ruling class. They were the race that was supposed to be ruling. And here, and they didn't like Shadrach and Abednego. And so what they did was set this whole thing up and say, you know something, Nebuchadnezzar did this, and he said, okay, when all these things happen, you're supposed to bow down and to worship this pole that I made. Well, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, no, king, we're not going to do that. But what happened was the Chaldeans the natives of the land looked at, went to Nebuchadnezzar and say, hey, look, didn't you say all things? And they repeated the words back to him almost verbatim. And they said, you know something? These three guys that are over your country, they ain't listening to you. So Nebuchadnezzar gets all weirded out. They get angry at what happened, and so he throws them in the furnace. As the story goes, well, they come out of the furnace, and then Nebuchadnezzar says, okay, you have to worship the God of Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. Okay, so we have that one. The third one is Daniel. Almost everyone knows about Daniel in the lion's den. And here's another thing where the evil tried to trip up Daniel because Daniel was the head of all of them. They couldn't find anything wrong with what Daniel did, so they set him up. They went to the king and said, hey, you know something, king? You're awesome, you're great, you're wonderful, and this is what we want you to do. We want you to go ahead, write a proclamation that for 30 days, the only person that asks anything of anyone is you. Because you're the cream of the crop, you're the big dog, you are the person. So, them stroking Darius's ego enough, he went and signed this off and said, okay, they can do that. Awesome. Daniel, though, would not do that. He would open his window, out on the balcony 3 times a day and worship and praise the Lord. Well, all the Chaldeans looked, all the presidents and all the princes went to Darius and said, hey, look, remember what you said? This guy Daniel, the guy that's second in the country next to you, ain't listening to you. Darius attempted some way to get out from under it because, again, he signed that proclamation. It had to be carried out. So it ended up that he threw Daniel in the lion's den, though he didn't want it. He couldn't break his word. Covered it, went in the morning, said, hey, Daniel, you okay? Daniel says, hey, king, live forever. Nothing happened to me. So the king's furious. He takes his presidents, those rulers, the princes, and he throws them in the lion's den, and the lions have a field day. So there's 3 examples in the Old Testament of evil men trying to set up evil ways in order to destroy the righteous. Now, unfortunately, we're not talking about necessarily the righteous here. We're talking relative terms. But I'm trying to show you how evil works. Evil will go behind your back. It'll set up situations that you can fall in. It starts making you defend yourself for what you've done. And it's not necessarily anything you've done. Maybe it is. But it's in order to deflect what that person is saying or what the country or the group or individuals are saying about you, deflecting it to someone else. We've got one more example. Of course, it's Adam and Eve. Yeah, the first lie that was told by the serpent. So here's what God lays out to Adam. And the Lord commanded the man, Adam, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die. Okay. God makes woman's hanging out, the snake slithers up and says, hey, hey lady, psst. Has God said, ye shall not eat of the every tree of the garden? And the woman said unto the serpent,